Okay, good morning everyone. Shalom Aleichem. Bruchim Abam to the Koilel Agra de Pirka. Special Monday afternoon National Shir. Welcome everybody. We have an amazing topic today. Today we're going to talk about the tefillos of the Yom Naram of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. And I want to bring to your attention the Maramakaimos that I just put up. And this is our last year of Tavshin Pei Daled. So we thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for giving us Siyata D'Shmaya to be able to gather together for Limud HaTorah this past year in good health. May the Ron Sham continue to mechazik us and give us the opportunity to learn together. I would like to share with you 10 fundamental insights in the tefillos of Rosh Hashanah davening that will revolutionize our appreciation and understanding of the tefillos, and Be'ezras Hashem will give it more understanding and meaning. Number one, if you notice the special additions that we make to the Machzor in Shemona Esrei, in the first bracha we say Zachreinu L'chaim, and then we say Mi Chamaycha Avarachamim, and then in the Moedim we say Uchsahiv L'chaim Tovim, and then in Sim Shalom we add the Sefer Chayim Bracha V'Shalom. Now it's interesting, in Bracha 1 and 2 the words we say are Zachreinu L'chaim and Michamecha Varachim Zachitzav L'chaim. But in the end of Shemona Esrei, it's Uchsahiv L'chaim Tovim. It's not Chaim, it's Chaim Tovim. The Sefer Chayim Bracha V'Shalom L'chaim Tovim. Why in the beginning of Shemona Esrei do we ask for just regular Chayim, and at the end of Shemona Esrei it's Chayim Tovim? The Ramchal wrote a wondrous commentary to the Machzor and about Rosh Hashanah in general, and it's called Maimar HaChachma, the essay on wisdom. It has a Rav David Kohen, the Rosh Yeshiva of Hebron, wrote a beautiful commentary on it. But the Maimar HaChachma is so fundamental and stirring, and the Ramchal, in explaining what takes place on Rosh Hashanah, says something very important. The judgment of Rosh Hashanah is, first and foremost, are you a tzaddik or are you a rasha? What's the difference whether a person's a tzaddik or a rasha? A tzaddik is rooted in the world to come. A tzaddik is connected to Olam Haba. A tzaddik lives in the world to come. A rasha is disconnected from the world to come. Now, that is the main judgment of Rosh Hashanah. What is one's status vis-a-vis the world to come? Is one rooted in the world to come, or is one not rooted in the world to come? And regarding this judgment, tzaddikim are written and sealed for life, Rishaim not, and the Beinonim are Tluyim V'Oimdim, their judgment is suspended. However, when it comes to the judgment of this world, whether a person will make parnasa, whether a person will be healthy, that is a separate judgment that begins on Rosh Hashanah and ends on Yom Kippur. The judgment of this world and a person's state in this world is not called Chayim, it's called Chayim Tovim, the good life. Life, the definition of life, the meaning of life, the epitome of life is Olam Haba. The first two brachos were mispalel for the world to come, and therefore we refer to it as Chayim without any further qualification. As opposed to the end of Shemona Esrei, we are talking about this world, and therefore we say Uchsayiv L'chaim Tovim Kol B'nei B'risecha. We refer to it as the good life. That refers to Olam Hazeh. So that's why in the first two brachos we say Chayim, and in the end of Shemona Esrei it becomes Chayim Tovim. Okay, we move on. there is a word that appears numerous times in the Shemoneh Esrei, and that is the word uvechein. We have 3 paragraphs that begin with uvechein. First we have uvechein tein pachtecha Hashem Elokeinu al kol ma'asecha. Then we say uvechein tein kavod Hashem li'amecha. And then we say uvechein tzadikim yiru v'yismachu. Why do we say uvechein? The word uvechein means and similarly. Well, what is the meaning of that? What do you mean and similarly? And similarly what? Why is that word mentioned in the Shemoneh Esrei? The Avudraham writes, and we know there's a principle that all the words of the Shemoneh Esrei and the Tfilos were not invented, but rather these are words that are found in Tanakh that the Anshe Knesset HaGdolah have adopted for our Tfilos. And where do we have the word uvechein? We have it in Esther, Perek Daled, Pasuk Tezayin. Lech kinois es kol hayudim hanimtzeim b'Shushan v'tzumu alai v'yal toichelu v'yal tishtu shloishes yomim laila v'yayim gam ani v'naroisai atzum kein uvchein. We have the word uvechein when we refer to Esther going into the king. And since we on Rosh Hashanah also stand before the Melech Malchei Amlach HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we also say the word uvechein to indicate that we are standing in front of the king. However, in the Siddur Hagra, in the Psicha for the Tfilos of Rosh Hashanah, it elaborates on this idea further. Namely, that we're not just trying to evoke a image of standing before the king, but let's try to climb into Esther's head for a moment. Esther was the queen. However, the law is that unless the king calls you, you cannot go uninvited and unannounced. So she was going unlawfully. She was going unrightfully. She didn't know what her fate would be. She, so to speak, put her life in her palms and was going to beg for her people and for her own life, but she was not sure what her outcome would be. Her life was on the line. She was risking her life to go in front of the king uninvited and unworthy. And that is exactly the image that we're trying to evoke on Rosh Hashanah. Because we, like Esther, also feel and should feel that as we're standing in front of the king, we too are unworthy. We too are not deserving to be able to have audience with the king and to ask for our life and for our well-being. So it's not just trying to evoke an image of standing in front of the king, but it's to evoke an image of standing in front of the king when we feel undeserving, unworthy, not knowing what our fate will be. Interestingly, by the way, the Avudraham says that V'chein, which is Gematria 72, is a reference to the 72 names of Hashem. However, the Avudraham rejects this, because we say Uvechein Hashem Elokeinu, so we afterwards reference the name of God, so V'chein cannot be a reference to the name of Hashem. However, if you look in the Zohar HaKadosh, the Zohar HaKadosh does say that the 3 Uvecheins is a reference to the 72 letter names of Hashem. And Rabbi Glatstein explains that when we're invoking the word uvechein to try to access another merit as well. And that is, in general, we're not really allowed to ask for our needs in the first 3 brachos. But how do we do it on Rosh Hashanah? We, like Esther, are coming in front of the king, Asher Loi Kadas. And we are an agent of Klal Yisrael to pray for the entire nation, because we have no choice. So in the Yom Naram we also say uvechein. Even though we did something Asher Loi Kadas, we made requests, we said Zachoinu L'chaim in the first 3 brachos. Now the word bechein is Gematria 72 chesed, and that is we're trying to access the midas HaChesed of Hashem, the midah with which Hashem created the world. We know that by all of creation, it said each time God created something, Vayihi chen, Vayihi chen, Vayihi chen. So And we know that God created the world with Midas HaChesed. So too on Rosh Hashanah, which is the day of the creation of the world, we too want to access the Midas HaChesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to try to say, even though we're not deserving, but we ask you to recreate us with the Midas HaChesed that you created the world, and you said about every Bria, Vayehi Chen, we too want to invoke and access that Midah, Uvechein, Uvetein Pachtecha, Uvechein Tein Kavod, Uvechein Tzadikim. So far we have one insight into why we begin Uchsoiv L'chaim Tovim, Uchsoiv L'chaim, and at the end Uchsoiv L'chaim Tovim. Why we say V'chein so many times. Either it's a reference to Esther's frightful audience with the king, or we're trying to invoke the Midas HaChesed of Brias HaOlam of Vayehi Chen, Vayehi Chen, Vayehi Chen. Now, there's an amazing explanation offered by the Kolbai and also quoted by the Beis Yosef in the secret of the three Vayehi Chens. We know by Musaf we say Malchios, Zechroinos, and Shefaros. But we don't say it by Shachris. Well, says the Kolba, even though we don't say it by Shachris, but we still reference them. How so? Because, says the Kolba, Uvechein tein pachtecha is referencing Malchios. We're asking Hashem to place His awe and reverence on the whole world. That is the element of Malchios. Secondly, V'chein tein kavod la'amecha, Hashem should honor the Jewish people, is Zechroinos, that we're asking Hashem to remember us for the good, to show us Hashgacha Pratis. And then finally, Shayfarais is indicated in Uvechein Sadikim Yirav Yismachu. And that's because, as we explained last week, the concept of the shofar is to strengthen the power of good and to weaken the power of evil, and to give goodness the ability to overcome evil. And that's what we're davening for when we say, Uvechein Sadikim Yirav Yismachu. And likewise, the righteous should see and should rejoice. That is the concept of shofaros. Hashem should empower the tzaddikim. So that's an additional insight, and hold on to that, because we're going to see soon why Malchios, Zechroinos, and shofaros are so fundamental to Rosh Hashanah, because now we're learning not only are they mentioned explicitly in Musaf, but they're also referenced in all the tefillos of Rosh Hashanah. Now, we say, Uvechein tzadikim yirav yismachu. The tzadikim will see and they will be happy. Visharim yahaloizu. And those who are just will exult. To be happy means to be happy inwardly. To exult means to be, your inner happiness expresses itself outwardly as well. You know, there's a pasuk. The light is sown for the righteous, and for the just-hearted there is happiness. So, the Reb Chaim Volozhiner explains as follows. At first, the tzaddik only has light that is sown for him, and those who are just has happiness. Let's explain that. The righteous are referred to people who do the right thing, but they still struggle with the Yetzer Hara. So they don't have complete joy, because life is not easy for them. They're struggling with the Yetzer Hara. They see injustice in this world, and even though they understand everything is for the good, it's hard for them to understand why Hashem does things certain ways. So the tzaddik, it's like he has light that is sown for him, but he doesn't have happiness yet. But those whose heart are completely just, they don't struggle with the Yetzer Hara. They don't have any questions at all, and therefore for them they already have happiness. So in this world, the tzaddik doesn't have happiness. He has a light that is sown that one day we hope will flourish to become happiness. Those who are just-hearted have happiness. Well, says the tefillah, in the future the tzaddikim who now only have Or, which is Zarua, they too will rejoice like the Yesharim. So in the future the tzaddikim yiru v'yismachu, and the Yesharim who have happiness now, the day will come that they will exult. Says Ramat Solomon, this perhaps is the reason why we begin Yom Kippur. Or Zarua la tzaddik u'liyishrei leiv simcha. Light is sown for the tzaddik, and for the just there is happiness. We're saying right now, before we do tshuva, we hope we're on the level that light is sown for us, and for those who are yishrei leiv, they already have simcha. But our goal is that all the tzaddikim should become yishrei leiv and already experience the happiness. Okay. Now let's talk about malchios, zechronos, and shayfaros in general. The main body of the Shemana Esrei on Rosh Hashanah for Musaf, malchios, zechronos, shayfaros. Rabbi Yosef Albo, the author of the Sefer HaIkrim, he wrote a Sefer HaIkrim, where he vehemently disagrees with the Rambam. The Rambam says there are 13 principles of faith. Says Rabbi Yosef Albo, no, it's not true. There are only 3 principles of faith. And they are the reality of God's existence, God's control and knowledge, and hashgacha pratis, and the divine origin of the Torah. There are not 13 principles of faith, there are 3 principles of faith. Belief in God's reality, belief in God's control and knowledge of creation, and the divine origin of the Torah. Says the Sefer Ikrim, a Jew who focuses on these principles and believes them with conviction will have great salvation. This is alluded to in the Pasuk. Ki Hashem shoftenu. God is our judge. Our judge, meaning He deals with us with hashgacha pratis. He knows everything that's happening in the world. He knows what we're thinking. He knows what we do in secret. Hashem mechaykekenu. God is our lawgiver. God gave us the Torah. The Torah is divinely given. And Hashem Malkeinu, the reality of God. Says the Sefer Ikrim, a Jew who believes these 3 principles with conviction will have great salvation and blessing. That is why the Anshe Knesset Gdola enacted in the Musaf of Rosh Hashanah, when our life is on the line, the main themes that we articulate are the 3 principles of faith. Number 1, Malchios, the reality of God. Number 2, Zechronos, the divine Zechronos, God's divine providence. And number 3, Shayfaros, the divine origin of the Torah. That is why Shayfaros speaks about the blowing of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, because we are enunciating and articulating the great principle of Torah min hashamayim. So very often people think, what merit can I try to amass to have a good outcome, to have a good judgment, to have a good year? And people try to do all kinds of segulos and superstitious practices, and when it comes down to it, really the greatest merit we could have is back to the basics, and that is to inculcate within us the basic principles and ideals of the Torah, namely Malchios, Zechronos, and Shayfaros. Dear friends, let us continue. In Zechronos, one of the Zechronos we say, Ki zecher kol hamasim lefanecha ba v'yata doresh masei chulam v'gam esnoyach v'yava zacharta v'atif gedehu v'varishu v'rachamim v'avyachas me'amavu shazos v'nei roya maleleihem al kein zechronim b'levanecha Hashem Elokeinu l'har boi zahroi kafroi stevel v'tzetzav k'choel hayam Kakosa v'soira secha v'yizkar l'kim esech z'chai v'eskal b'him ashita b'teva v'yaver l'kim ruach al haaretz v'yashoiku hamayim. Now this is where you kick in. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, why do we read this whole Megillah about Noach? by every other Zechronos, we say, V'nemar koyamar Hashem zachar l'chasenu ra'yech avas kulosech midbar ezlo yizarua. V'nemar. We just, snappy. And Noach gets a whole Megillah. V'games Noach v'atifkedehu b'dvar shavarachamim. What's the whole story? We know the story of the flood. If you don't know the story of the flood by now, you're in trouble on the Yom Adin. I'm saying if the guy doesn't know the story of the deluge, he's in trouble. Why do we have to go mention that God remembered Noach with love and salvation and mercy? What's this all about? Says the Brisker Rav. The Rambam gives us certain principles of Zechronos in Hilchos Shofar Parakim Alachatas. Says the Rambam in Maskirin Zechronos Malchias v'Shofaros shel Paranos. We don't mention Zechronos, Malchias, and Shofaros of punishment. Zechronos like Vayizkar ki basar hema, because that's Zechronos of punishment. Malchios like Bechima shvucha emlech alechem. Shofaros like Tiku shofar begiva. And we don't mention Zechronos of an individual, like Zachreni Hashem b'rtzoi namecha, or Zachri li eloi kaila tov, like Nehemiah said. So frek the Brisker Rav, if we don't mention Zechronos of a Yachid, then how could we say Zechronos on Noach? Therefore, the tefillah is marich that by Hashem remembering Noach, his memory came before God, laharbois zaroi ka'afrois tevel, to increase his seed like the dust of the world, bitse'atzav k'chal hayam, and his offspring like the sand. In other words, this is not only the remembrance of an individual, because by remembering Noach, it allowed mankind to proliferate. So the long arichos about Noach is to justify why this is a valid Zechronos. You're not allowed to have a Zechronos on a Yachid. The answer is, that's why the Tefillah says, Zechronoi b'lefanecha, laharboi zaroi, ka'afrois tevel, v'tse'atzav, k'chal hayam. Next. Penultimate insight into the davening. Ki zoicher kol hanishkachos atahu me'olam v'yein shekol levnei chisech voidecha v'akedas yizozar hayoim v'rachamim tizkar Yibaruch atah Adonai Shem zoicher haberis. Okay. I got to brush up a little bit on the nusach, but okay. So we say that Akedas Yitzchak Lazare Hayam Barachmim Tizkar. The Akedah of Yitzchak, God should remember with mercy. And the Chassam Sofer in the famous Tshuva Siman Reish Ches wonders, why do we invoke the Akedah of Yitzchak? Wasn't it a Nisayon for Avraham Avinu? Why on Rosh Hashanah do we specifically invoke Akedas Yitzchak? And the Chassam Sofer famously says, let's just picture for a moment the difference between the challenge of Abraham and Isaac. You see, Abraham, God told Abraham, Kachna es bincha es yechidcha asher hafta. But God didn't come to Yitzchak that day. He didn't say, Yitzchak, lechna el eretz hamoria ve'avicha yishchatecha. No. God didn't say a word to Yitzchak. So why did Yitzchak go? Because Abraham told him to. So Abraham's fulfillment of the Akedah was Torah Shebechsav, was black and white. Yitzchak's fulfillment of the Akedah was Emunas Chachamim, was Torah Shebal Peh. And that's a greater merit. That's a greater Zechus. Friends, says the Chassam Sofer, we know that the Avos kept the whole Torah before it was given. So then why hadn't Avram ever sacrificed Yitzchak before this day? The answer is, surely Avram thought about it, and his conclusion was, not only does God not want it, God abhors human sacrifice. So Avraham came to the conviction that God abhors human sacrifice, to the point where he broke all the altars in Canaan because he told people that your practice is disgusting to God. He risked his life to teach the world that human sacrifice is abhorrent to the one God. And think about what kind of a challenge it was when God said, hey, Abraham, I have a great idea. You know, the kid that you had at 100 years old, I want you to sacrifice him. And Abraham asked no questions. He didn't say, wait a second, God, I see with divine spirit, you really don't want me to do this. Abraham bowed and deferred to the request of God. But as challenging as it was to Abraham, it was even more challenging to Yitzchak. And the reason it was more challenging to Yitzchak is because Yitzchak did not hear it from God. Yitzchak heard it from Abraham Avinu. And for Yitzchak to do it, for Yitzchak it was Begedar Tar Shabal Peh. Says the Chassam Sofer then, when we invoke the merit of the Akedah, that merit will only work for us if we too excel in this area of listening to the Chachamim and deferring to the opinion of the Chachmei Yisrael. So this is why we emphasize on Rosh Hashanah the greater Zechus. The greater Zechus of the Akedah was Akedas Yitzchak, not what Avraham Avinu did. And one final offering, dear friends. On Rosh Hashanah, we say Avos, we say Gvurais, we say Kedushas Hashem, and according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, we also include Kedushas Hayom with Kedushas Hashem. According to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, we include Malchios with Kedushas Hashem. Malchios would go in the third bracha, and we do not blow shofar according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri in the third bracha. We incorporate Kedushas Hayom in we say Kedushas Hayom as the fourth bracha and blow. We say Zechroinos as the fifth bracha and blow. We say Shofaros as the sixth bracha and blow. We say Avoida, we say Hoida, we say Berachos Kohanim. In other words, Malchios is part of Kedushas Hashem, Kedushas Hayom is separate, Zechroinos is separate, Shofaros is separate. Says Rabbi Akiva, you're not going to blow shofar Malchios. Rather, he says, you say Avos, you say Gvurais, you say Kedushas Hashem, you incorporate Malchios with Kedushas Hayom, you blow, you say Zechroinos, you blow, you say Shavaros, and you blow. So Rabbi Akiva says Malchios is part of Kedushas Hashem, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says Malchios is part of, Rabbi Akiva says Malchios is part of Kedushas Hayom, and according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Malchios is part of Kedushas Hashem. The Gemara brings a brisa. Where do you say Kedushas Hayom? So again, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, it's the fourth bracha by itself. According to Rabbi Akiva, it's the fourth bracha with Malchios. But the Gemara brings a brisa. Rabbi says, you say Kedushas Hayom with Malchios, which is what Rabbi Akiva says. Rav Shimon Gamliel says, no, you say Kedushas Hayom with Zechroinos. In the Sefer Eish Tamid, he brings the following question. That means, in Malchios, you're really ending off Baruch Atah Hadoi Shem Melech al kol haaretz Mekadesh Yisrael V'yayim azikaharon. Think about that. You're saying Malchios in Kedushas Hayom. So that means you're ending off with two things. You're ending off with Malchios and Kedushas Hayom. You say Melech al kol haaretz, that's Malchios. Mekadesh Yisrael, that's Kedushas Hayom. But there's a klal in brachos that in chosim and b'shnayim. How are you allowed to end off Malchios and Kedushas Hayom together? Or according to Rosh Shimon Gamliel, you say Melech al kol haaretz Zoicher habris. How could you end off with two things? So what do we see from here? We see that Malchios, Zechronos, and Shefaros are not separate concepts. They're part of Kedushas Hayom. You see, Rosh Hashanah doesn't have a name, Rosh Hashanah, like Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaSukkos. The Kedushas Hayom of Rosh Hashanah is the Malchios, is the Zechronos, is the Shefaros. The question is, what's Ikar HaKedusha? Is Ikar HaKedusha the Malchios? If the Ikar HaKedusha is Malchios, then we say, Melech HaKol HaAretz, Mekadesh Yisrael, V'yayim HaZikaron. Or, because Rosh Hashanah has three names, Yom Trua, which is Shefaros, Yom Zikaron, which is Zechronos, and Melech HaKol HaAretz, which is Malchios. The Shaila is which is the Ikar Kedusha. So by putting Malchios in Kedushas Hayom, it's not two different endings. The sanctity of the day of Rosh Hashanah is God's sovereignty of the world. It's not like Pesach. The sanctity is Chag HaMatzos. The sanctity of Rosh Hashanah is God's sovereignty. So these, friends, are 10 insights onto Rosh Hashanah davening. Number 1, from the Ramchal, why in the first two brachas we say Uchsoiv L'chaim, Zachrinu L'chaim, and in the end we say L'chaim Tovim. Chaim is Olam Haba, Chaim Tovim is Olam Hazeh. We say Uvechein to evoke the fright of someone standing before the king unworthy. We say Uvechein, according to Label Eger number 3, because we're evoking the Midas HaChesed of Brias HaOlam of Vayehichein. Number 4, the Kolboi says the three Vayecheins are enunciating the principles of Uvechein, Tein Pachtecha is God's sovereignty, Malchios. Uvechein Tein Kavod is Zechronos. Uvechein Tzadikim is Shefaros. That's insight number 4. Insight number 5 is Uvechein Tzadikim Yiru V'Yismachu. That right now the Tzadikim only have light that is sown, but the day will come that they will be rejoiced, and they will rejoice because the light that they sown, and they are now struggling with the Yetzer Hara. But ultimately the day will come when they will rejoice like the Yisharim do today. And that was one of the reasons why we start Yom Kippur. Or Zarua la Tzadik. The light is sown for the righteous, and they're hoping to become Liyishrei Leiv Simcha. That's number 5. Number 6, according to the Sefer HaIkrim, there are 3 principles with which the Torah is based upon, and if one believes these principles with conviction, one will have salvation, and they are God's reality, which is Malchios, God's providence, which is Zechronos, and Torah Min Hashamayim, which is Shefaros. That's insight number 5. Insight number 6 is, how do we have why is the Zikaron about Noach so long? It's because there's a halachic principle. We cannot have a Zikaron about an individual, but because Noach's Zikaron, was for the future of the whole world, that is a valid Zikaron. So far we have Zachrinu L'chaim, Uvechein, the Reb Leibela on Uvechein, the 3 Uvecheins is Malchios, Zechronos, Shefaros. We have Uvechein Tzadikim Yiru V'Yismachu. Is 5. We have the Malchios, Zechronos, Shefaros, 6. The Zikaron of Noach is 7. We have the Chasam Sofer who the Chasam Sofer that we invoke Akedas Yitzchak, because the greater merit is the merit of Torah Shebal Peh, namely what Yitzchak's Zuchus was and not of Abraham. And then number 9 is why we put Malchios in Kedushas Hayom. It's because the sanctity of Rosh Hashanah is the Malchios Zechronos Shefaros, and those who put Malchios in Kedushas Hayom, it's because the sanctity of Rosh Hashanah is the Malchios of Hashem, and we'll have to count as the 10th one the idea that the Zohar HaKadosh says that we say uvechein, uvechein, uvechein 3 times, because that's a reference to the 72 names of Hashem with which He controls the various operations of this world. And Be'ezus Hashem, the more kavanah we have in the davening, the more power our tefillah has, and in that merit, Be'ezus Hashem, all of our tefillos should be neskabel barachamim of ratzain. Please accept my humble wishes. Everyone should be zoicha to a shnas chayim v'shalom, shefa bracha v'hatzlacha, nachas de kedusha, yimali Hashem kol mashal yischub chal matayva, a gut yar, a gazunta yar, ksiv chsim matayva. And I'm going to get Reb Tzvi the Mar Mekayimos. Okay. Kol tov everyone, a gut yar, a gaben shiyar. Kol tov.